Hello, and welcome to the planning phase of the SDLC. All right, in the previous video, we walked through what the SDLC was all about. And we talked about we're going to focus primarily on the planning phase, the analysis phase, and the design phase, and the development phase. And we're going to do this over the next couple weeks so we kind of get an idea of what each one of these phases are. We're kind of going to hit each one of these phases, though, a little bit quickly. Give you some opportunities to play around and try to do some things to better gain your understanding of these phases. And then kind of, like I said, move on the second part of the semester, kind of drilling down a little bit deeper into each one of them, utilizing a methodology. All right, so, but to get started here, we're going to drill down a little bit deeper on each one of these phases. And first, we'll start with the planning phase. Okay, so we're going to talk about what the planning phase is. We're going to talk about how to collect information needed in the planning phase, talk about what do we actually do and what the typical deliverables would be in the planning phase, and what decisions are made in the planning phase. All right? The planning phase, if we just kind of look through these bullet points, it says during the planning phase of the SDLC, usually the following occurs. I always say usually. Once again, everybody has different perspectives on things. But the problem is defined and understood. The scope of the problem is defined, meaning what are the boundaries of the problem, and feasibility of the chances of success is analyzed. The planning phase is just that. It's the idea phase. If somebody has an idea, I want this. I want to automate my office. So with that said, what do you do with that? And so you sit down and you start planning a little bit about what this all means. So what we do is we try to understand what the problem is. Opportunity, right? What is it? And we want to make sure we understand it. We want to make sure our customer understands it, whoever we're working for at this point in time, be it somebody we're working for or somebody we're doing consulting for. We want to understand the scope of it, meaning how, let's make sure we put boundaries around it. We don't want this open-ended problem statement. Automate my office. We need to drill down a little bit deeper on what that actually means. Well, I want you to automate my accounting department, automate my appointment taking, automate my transactions, the processes, automate whatever, procurement of materials and supplies. That's what we want to do here. We want to get a little bit more deeper in this. And then what we're going to do is we're going to walk through and make sure we can be successful based upon some criteria that has been developed over the years that sort of helps ensure success. I shouldn't say it that way. It's probably not ensuring success. It's increasing the probability of success. But now is the time to ask some of these questions to ensure that there is a probability of success. Based upon that, if we don't ask these questions now, and we kind of ignore them, our chances of success go way down. So we're going to talk about that a little bit in this video. So the problem is defined and understood. Kind of the first thing here. You'll see what I'm doing here. I'm going to walk through each one of these bullet points. Usually your user customer asks you to do something. Automate my office. I kind of suggested that. Create me a system that can do this. It's important to try to understand what is being asked. Discuss it and ask questions. You want to be as detailed as possible on the problem statement and what is truly being asked of you. All right? It's very important in this phase. How do we move forward or even understand what if we can be successful if we don't truly understand what they're asking us to do? So it's important to really ask that question. If somebody says, automate my office, what do you mean by that? That's what you want to know. Tell me more. Automate my office. What do you mean? That's a big, broad, open-ended statement. You don't want to start any project with anything like that. The scope of the problem needs to be defined. So as you're asking this question, what is the problem? Give me some boundaries. In discussing the problem opportunity, it's important to put some boundaries around what is truly being asked. Are we really automating the entire office? What is meant by that? We kind of talked about that before. This discussion could take a while and might include more than one meeting or people to truly understand and come to a conclusion. Don't think this is easy. It's not, okay? We don't want to spend days on it or even hours on it possibly, maybe hours, but not days or weeks. We want to get down to truly understanding what the boundaries are. I want to automate my order taking system. That's what I want to do. Okay, what is an order taking system to you? Well, order taking system is that a customer comes in and be able to, say I want to buy this product and buy that, blah, 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 blah. You kind of want to get an idea of, exactly what they're visioning. In a lot of cases, we don't be walking into businesses and not truly understanding what that business is all about. Happens all the time as an IT professional. That shouldn't be too scary as long as we keep asking the right questions. So next thing you know, you got your first job or you're a consultant and you walk into a business that you never really understood. It's your job to ask questions to seek to understand. Once again, business is business. You're either selling a service or a product. That's why we walked through that before. So you're going to ask some questions around what their business is all about. The whole piece that we just completed in regards to what's their business plan and so on to truly understand. And then when they say they want this ordering system, you want to then be able to talk to them a little bit more intelligently about what that means to them. Okay. Feasibility of the chances of success is analyzed. So that's the final piece of this. Before we get too far, it's important that we determine if the project can be successful. The last thing we want to do is fail, especially if we can avoid it. Kind of an interesting statement there. That, meaning we don't want to fail. And if we can avoid it up front by doing some due diligence, if you will, a little bit now, we can avoid that failure a little bit later on. Okay? So in a lot of ways, we do this for us, the IT professional. We want to know we can be successful. We don't want to guess. We don't want, because we don't want a bad name. Once we fail at something, it's out there, okay, especially in the real world. It's okay to, have some failures in college because you can overcome those. Failures in the real world kind of stick with you. And so that's why you're learning this stuff now to allow yourself to ensure that, you're going to be more successful once you hit the real world. But trust me, will you have failures in the real world? Of course you will. It's all part of the process. It's all part of the learning. It's all part of the experience that you'll gain. But if we can offset a few of these based upon a course like this, let's take advantage of it. When we talk about feasibility, we look at four distinct categories of feasibility to consider. This is from the Shelley Cashman book that we're referencing for this class. I like these though. It's organization, technical, economic, and schedule. Based upon these four categories, we ask questions. You're probably asking right now to yourself, Bob, what questions? Okay, let's get there. The organizational feasibility. What are we asking? We want to make sure management supports the project and is willing to pay for it. Sounds sort of obvious, right? Trust me, it's not. Every once in a while, you'll get into a big corporation, and next thing you know, somebody comes to you and says, I really want you to do this. Well, that's all well and good. Does that person have the authority to pay for it? Does that person actually have the authority to make these type of decisions? In most cases, the answer might be yes, but in some cases, the answer might be no. But it's really a great question right now to make sure the answer is always yes. If you sit back and you ask your customer who's asking you to do something, does your manager approve of this? As a person who's going to pay the bill for me to do this type of work, does he approve of it or he or she approve of it? If the answer is, I don't know, well, we need to go find out before we ever move on. Last thing you want to do is do a bunch of work for somebody and realize later on the manager says, no, I didn't want to do that and I'm not paying for that. Next thing you know, you just wasted your time and your money and your expenses. Get the idea? Will the application require training? I've been in situations before where we sit back and we're going to implement this big change for this company, but the bosses there aren't willing to train their people to use the system. That's setting up for disaster. I mean, so we need to ensure that they will train their people so they use this new application that we're developing for them to its fullest. If they don't, it's a failure. Will the users of the application be involved in the planning and design from the start? It's really important. How can I say this? We are change agents, okay? When it comes to developing information technology for businesses, we are developing stuff that's usually replacing manual efforts, which means it's quite a bit of a change for the people who have been doing those manual efforts over and over again over the years. With that said, we're changing their jobs. People do not like change. Do you like change? I mean, change is inevitable in life, yet it's not overly comfortable. Some people get used to it faster than others. Regardless, we need to help them overcome that change and overcome that fear of change, or basically get them into the point of accepting that change as quickly as they possibly can. One way of doing that is being involved from the start of the design of the application. If the manager says no, they will not, that's a red flag. It could hurt the success of this. The last thing we want is develop an application that the people who are going to be using it absolutely hate it and they don't want to use it and they're grumbling about it. Makes us look bad. And that's kind of the same one in the last one, with the new system place any new demands on the users or require any operating changes. With that said, if it does, we need to address that now and make sure everything is good. Does the company, so the next one is technical feasibility. Does the company have the needed technical expertise? So I'm sorry, let me look at this again. So technical feasibility is the next one. What we're looking for here, I should say, before I read through the bullet points, is we want to make sure that they understand that this new technology we have requires support in some way or another. It just doesn't fly up there and just stand there by itself. It needs technical support, it needs hardware support, it needs people to support it. So do they understand that? Do they realize that there's a total cost of ownership even beyond the initial implementation? Does the platform we're going to put it on have sufficient capacity to grow and to actually be used? Will the hardware and software environment be reliable? We don't know what that is. We want to ask them the questions and make sure, where are we going to host this thing at? Where are we going to put this thing at? What do you have currently? Can that handle this type of thing? If not, are you willing to buy new servers, new technical hardware to be able to support what we're doing? That's kind of what the last one says too. Will the current hardware provide adequate performance? That make sense? We want to know these answers. Like I said, in a lot of cases, when we go work with these clients or these customers, they don't understand what's required of a new technical application. That's our job to ask them, and that's our job to educate them. Economic feasibility. This goes in two forms. Does the company you're working for, the people who are going to be purchasing this piece of software or paying you to write this piece of software, understand there's a cost associated with it? And with that, in some cases, it could be a substantial cost associated with it. Do they realize that? If they don't, if they think they're going to be getting something for nothing or very, very cheaply, that could be an issue. I had one client I went to, and we were proposing this whole thing, and we were putting it together. His thoughts were it's going to cost $1,000. My thought was going to cost $50,000. That's a big difference. He looked at me and says, "Well, I'm not paying $50,000." And I said, "Fine, thank you very much." And I walked out. And I shook his hand. It was not anything mean, but I can't do it for $1,000. I have to eat also, right? That's what my job is. So with that said, we need to make sure they understand the value of technology and why. So where's the value at? We need to make sure we educate them on what the benefits. Does the benefits outweigh the proposed costs? If we educate in this way, and it does, then we could possibly convince them to purchase this type of system. So this $50,000 system, if I basically told them that if you paid this, but within a year or two, it will buy itself back by more efficiencies, increased revenue, and so on, that's a good thing, right? That's actually a good investment. And that's what we want to educate them on. So the economic feasibility is what we're doing really worth doing? Number one, number two, I should say. Number one is, does the person we're working with understand that there's a cost associated with this? Number two is, then what we're working on, is it worth doing? Does what are the tangible benefits? Increased revenue and decreased costs. What's the intangible benefits? Will include improved job satisfaction, the image, the customer satisfaction, and so on. If the answers are no to all these, or some of these, we really need to think this thing through. We don't want to be just doing technology for the sake of technology. I've been there. I've seen that happen. It's not worth it. All of a sudden, it becomes better just to do it manually than it is to do it technically, through some type of application. You may have realized that. You may have come across a piece of a software that is just easier to do it manually than actually work through the software. Our job is to make sure whatever we do is a good investment for our customer. Schedule feasibility. Can the project be implemented in an acceptable time frame? Well, if I'm doing this for a customer, and the customer says I need it in 6 months, can I implement it in 6 months? I don't know. Based upon the scope, who's to say, right? But if I can't, I can't. I need to let them know that. Either come up with a different solution, a different time frame, or go find somebody else who could do it faster for you. Make sense? So these are the feasibilities, that we sit back and we talk about: the organizational feasibility, the technical feasibility, the economic feasibility, and the schedule feasibility. I hope this makes sense in the sense that here we are in the planning phase, and we start asking these questions now. It really helps us to ensure that we can be more probable, I should say, to be successful in the end. If any of these questions come back as no, 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 we need to throw up a red flag, possibly walk away, or renegotiate what we're trying to do and make sure we educate on why these things are important to address now with our customer. How are we going to collect all this information? Well, usually what you do is you basically got to analyze the organizational charts, try to figure out who you're doing what for, right? We talked about that before. And then we got to conduct interviews, review documentation, observe operations, and conduct user surveys. These are any or all of these. So you got to do a little bit of analysis, a little bit of interviewing to really try to get the answers to the things we need for the planning phase, from what's the project, what's the scope of the project, and is it feasible? And these are some ways to actually collect that. Make sense? What do we usually do? Well, in the end, we usually put together a document, something we're going to share with our customer that will basically go through what we found. And what we found is usually the description of the problem, description and understanding of the scope of the problem. We want to write all this down to make sure our customer agrees and we're not moving forward without that both of us are on the same page. Our fact-finding results, okay, that based upon our interviewing and surveying and so on. Our feasibility analysis based upon those questions we asked for each one of those feasibility pieces, and basically our recommendation. And our recommendation is really going to be based upon what we found. So we want to base a recommendation must be made as to whether the success of the project is probable and the project should move on forward to the next phase, being the analysis phase. Or the success of the project is improbable and the project should be reconsidered. And when I say reconsidered, it could be ended or it could be rethought through and maybe try to overcome some of the barriers we found in our fact-finding phase as it comes to feasibility. Make sense? We don't want to just dive in and keep saying, yeah, we'll do it, because if you do, I'm telling you, failure is on the horizon, and we don't want to fail. It makes us look bad, and nobody wants to work with us anymore. You don't want that, okay? And that's what this whole piece is about. All right, so as stated in the previous lecture, the SDLC is set up to allow for success the first time. Much of the success is spending time to ensure the project is a good idea and can be successful based upon the feasibility categories. So nothing is worse than getting far along in the project, spending a lot of money, and realize late the project will not be successful. That's what we're trying to accomplish, and that is the planning phase. A lot of students at this point feel like, well, you haven't given them a solution. We're not doing any kind of solutions right now. That comes after the analysis phase. This is just looking at, let me understand what your problem is. Let me understand if it's feasible to do. Does that make sense? And if it is, then we dive into the details and, we get to the root causes of the problem and all those things we've already discussed previously in this course. All right. And then with that, we move on. All right. Hope that makes sense.